prison unlike any other, a fortress designed not to rehabilitate but to contain, a place where the most feared gang members on Earth vanish into cold, unrelenting silence. No mercy, no escape, just survival. El Salvador has long been haunted by one of the most violent gang wars in modern history. For decades, the Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13, and the Barrio, 18 controlled entire cities, turning neighborhoods into battlegrounds. Extortion, kidnappings, mass killings. For years, their influence stretched from the streets of San Salvador to cities across the United States. But in 2022, everything changed. President Nayib Bukele launched the most aggressive gang crackdown the world has ever seen. Overnight, thousands disappeared, houses were raided, men were dragged from their homes, sons and fathers, some guilty, some merely suspected, rounded up and taken away. Over 70,000 arrests in under 2 years, no trials, no second chances, just an iron-fisted response to decades of bloodshed. The solution? A facility unlike any before it. A prison built to hold over 40,000 men, where the most hardened criminals are kept under relentless, round-the-clock lockdown. No windows, no freedom, no outside contact. This is cecot, the most feared prison in El Salvador. But what really happens behind these walls? This is the untold story of what it means to live inside El Salvador's mega prison. Hidden behind towering concrete walls lies one of the most secure prisons in human history, a place engineered to hold thousands of the most dangerous men in El Salvador, a facility where movement is limited, freedom is non-existent, and time has no meaning. This is cecot, a prison built not just to house criminals, but to eliminate any chance of escape, to control, to contain, and to break them down piece by piece. The numbers alone are staggering. A maximum capacity of 40,000 inmates, more than 600 surveillance cameras, armed guards stationed at every corridor, every entrance, every blind spot. Though in this place, there are no blind spots. Every inch of this facility is under constant watch. Every step taken, every breath drawn. It's all recorded, analyzed, monitored. There are no shadows to hide in, no corners to retreat to. Inside there are no beds, no pillows, no blankets, just concrete slabs. Cold, hard, unforgiving. Men sleep shoulder to shoulder, their bodies pressed against the bare floor. There is no comfort, only confinement. No personal space, no privacy. They move as one, eat as one, suffer as one. There are no windows, no view of the sky, no concept of time. Days blend into nights, and nights dissolve into silence. Family visits? Denied. Phone calls? Non-existent. Letters? A thing of the past. An official once said, they wanted to be part of hell, now they live in it. And for many here, there is no escape from that reality. Advanced technology ensures no one can assume a false identity. Facial recognition scans every inmate. Their movements are logged, their patterns analyzed. There is no room for deception. No gang tattoos are allowed, no symbols, no history. Upon arrival, inmates are stripped, their heads are shaved. Their markings, the very ink that once defined them, are erased. In here, there is no identity beyond the number assigned to them. To the outside world, cecot is a triumph of law and order, a statement that El Salvador will no longer bow to gang control. But for those inside, it is something else entirely. This is the reality of life inside El Salvador's mega prison, and for the men trapped behind these walls, survival is the only thing that matters. Inside these walls, time does not belong to the inmates. Every second is controlled, every movement dictated, every breath accounted for. The day begins before the sun ever rises. At exactly 3 in the morning, the silence is broken. A sharp, commanding voice cuts through the darkness. Roll call. No hesitation, no delay. Every man must stand. Eyes forward, heads bowed. A single misstep could change everything. There is no room for resistance, no room for questions. A single refusal to comply could mean hours, days, even weeks in isolation. And isolation, in a place like this, is a sentence in itself. Movement is limited. Conversations forbidden. Laughter a memory from another life. Every action is monitored, every sound recorded. The walls do not simply hold these men, they consume them. Even the most basic human needs are controlled. There are no meals inside the cells, no moments of privacy to eat in silence. Food is rationed, monitored, watched over as if it were a privilege, not a necessity. Some refuse to eat. Others have no choice. Hunger is a quiet enemy here, and it does not fight fair. Punishment is swift, unforgiving. Solitary confinement awaits those who step out of line. A space so small a man cannot fully stretch his legs, a place where the silence is heavier than the walls themselves. Some spend days in these rooms, some much longer. A minor infraction, a look in the wrong direction, a word spoken at the wrong time. The reasons don't matter. The consequences do. For those who test the limits, punishment is immediate. No second chances, no explanations. Violence is met with force, and force is absolute. Over time, something else begins to take hold. Days without light, weeks without hearing a familiar voice, months of nothing but orders, walls, and silence. It strips them down, layer by layer, until nothing remains but the fight to endure. Some break, some lose themselves, others find ways to survive. For years, these men ruled the streets. Now, they are forced to live side by side. MS-13 and Barrio 18, sworn enemies, now trapped under the same roof, in the same space, breathing the same air. There is no escape. No weapons, no armies to back them. Only the knowledge that the man standing next to them may have once been their executioner. Even here the rules remain. Old rivalries do not die. They shift, they adapt. Messages are passed in secrecy. Coded hand gestures replace spoken words. Power is not erased, it is only rewritten. For the government, cecot is the final answer, the ultimate solution to El Salvador's gang crisis. But for the men inside, it is nothing more than another battlefield. The war did not end when these walls were built. It only changed the rule. Not every inmate here is the same. Some were street soldiers carrying out orders in exchange for loyalty. Some were lookouts, runners, messengers. And then there are others. The men who built these organizations. The ones who sent hundreds to their deaths without ever pulling a trigger. The ones whose names still carry weight, even behind bars. These are the most dangerous inmates inside cecot. The men whose reputations were carved into the streets of El Salvador long before they were locked away. Juan Carlos Lopez, better known as El Diablo, a name spoken in whispers long before he ever set foot in this prison. For years, he was one of MS-13's most feared enforcers, the man responsible for enforcing discipline within the ranks, the one who made sure that betrayals never went unanswered. Authorities say he orchestrated dozens of assassinations, killings that weren't random. They were messages, statements, proof that loyalty was not optional, that fear was the most effective weapon MS-13 had ever known. In here, he has no power, no soldiers, no weapons. But men like Lopez do not need them. His name alone still carries weight, and in a place like this, that is sometimes enough. Miguel Ramirez. Known on the streets as Loco, a name earned, not given, a name that came with stories. Stories of violence, of executions carried out with no hesitation, no second thoughts. He wasn't just another member of Barrio 18, he was their war chief. The man who decided who lived and who died, and when he spoke, his word was final. Authorities believe he ordered some of the most brutal massacres in recent history. Entire families wiped out in the name of territory, rivals hunted down with surgical precision. To the outside world, these were senseless acts of violence, but for Ramirez, they were strategy, pieces in a much larger game. Now, in cecot, he is nothing more than a number, a man stripped of his rank, his resources, his weapons. But for men like Ramirez, power is never truly lost. It is only hidden, waiting. Not all leaders operate from the front lines. Some control the chaos from a distance. Some never get their hands dirty. They don't need to. Francisco Torres was one of those men. Better known as El Chino, Torres was not a killer in the traditional sense. His strength was not in the streets, not in shootouts or ambushes. His power came from influence, from money, from control. Torres was a key financier for MS-13, moving millions through drug trafficking, money laundering, and international smuggling routes. He didn't need to pull the trigger. He owned the men who did. In here, the money is gone, the businesses are gone, the empire he built has been reduced to nothing. Or at least that is what the authorities believe. But money has a way of finding its way back. And Torres is not the kind of man who forgets how to use it. Authorities say that inside these walls the gangs have been dismantled, that there is no more leadership, no more influence, that these men, once the architects of violence, are now powerless. But control does not disappear, it adapts, it finds new ways to exist. Intimidation does not require weapons, it does not require an army. Sometimes all it takes is a name, a reputation, a single reminder of what someone is capable of. And in cecot, that is sometimes enough. The greatest fear of the authorities is not escape. It is not violence within the walls. It is the possibility that even now these men are still in control, that even locked away, their reach extends far beyond these walls. For now they are prisoners. But for how long? A prison, survival is not just about physical endurance. It is not just about hunger, violence, or punishment. Survival here is a mental war, a battle fought not with fists, but with silence, with isolation, with the slow, unrelenting erosion of the mind. This prison was not designed to rehabilitate. It was not built to reform. It was created to strip away identity, to erase the power these men once held, to turn them into nothing. There is no contact with the outside world, no letters, no visits, no voices of family members to remind them of who they once were. The world beyond these walls has become a memory, a distant, fading thought. Every step is monitored, every breath is watched. Privacy does not exist. These men are never alone, and yet they have never been more isolated. Some resist, they refuse to eat. They let hunger take them, believing that death is the only way to reclaim control. Others whisper to themselves, their words broken, their thoughts unraveling. In here, the silence is not just an absence of noise. It is something else, something heavier, something that presses against the mind, breaking it down piece by piece. There is no therapy, no counseling, no one to speak to. There is only time, endless time. One officer put it simply, they are no longer soldiers, they are caged animals. Beyond these walls, a different battle is being fought. A battle not with weapons or prisons, but with words, with policies, with global scrutiny. International human rights organizations have condemned the conditions inside cecot, calling them inhumane. They speak of prisoners locked away without trial, of men who may be guilty of nothing more than suspicion, of mass arrests with no regard for justice. Reports have surfaced. Stories of torture, of severe malnutrition, of inmates beaten into submission. Some claim they have been denied even the most basic medical care. And human rights attorney stated, "This is not a correctional facility. This is a machine of suffering, designed to dehumanize, to erase, to crush men, whether guilty or innocent." But inside El Salvador, many do not see a crisis. They see victory. For the first time in decades, crime has plummeted, extortion has dropped, murders are at an all-time low. The people no longer live in fear of gangs. One shopkeeper said, "I can walk home at night without looking over my shoulder. My children are safe. That's all that matters." Bukele's stance is firm. He sees this as necessary. He calls cecot the solution El Salvador has always needed. To him, this is not a question of ethics. It is a question of survival. The debate continues. Justice or oppression? A necessary evil or a violation of human rights? For those inside cecot, the argument does not matter. The world may speak in courts, in headlines, in protests, but behind these walls, the only reality that exists is the one they wake up to every day. El Salvador has done what many believed was impossible. It has silenced the gangs. It has locked away thousands. It has built a prison so vast, so secure, that escape is unthinkable. But the question remains, does this end the war? Or is it only the beginning of something else? For now, the streets are quiet. The people feel safer. The government claims victory. But history has proven one undeniable truth. Crime does not disappear. It waits. It adapts. Will this prison system work long-term? Mass incarceration has given El Salvador something it has not had in decades: control. But control is fragile. A prison, no matter how impenetrable, is not a solution. It is a pause, a delay in the inevitable. If history is any indication, the true test is not what happens now, but what happens in the years to come. How long before the gangs rebuild from within? How long before power shifts once again? The guards may hold the keys, but power is not always measured by who is free and who is not. Bukele has made his position clear. The war on gangs is not over. It will never be over until every last remnant of MS-13 and Barrio 18 is gone, permanently. More prisons, harsher sentences, tighter restrictions. The government is prepared to go further than ever before, but at what cost? How many will be swept up in the crackdown? How many will be lost in the system, guilty or not? The next generation is watching. The children who once feared these gangs are now growing up in a country where they no longer roam free. But what happens when they come of age? What happens when they see the cycle repeat itself? One thing is certain. The gangs once controlled El Salvador. They were kings of the streets, ruling through fear and bloodshed. Now they are ghosts behind walls. But ghosts have a way of returning. Expert said it best. Gangs don't die, they evolve. El Salvador has taken the first step towards something new, but the battle is far from over. The question is no longer whether these men can escape these walls, but whether their influence ever truly left. El Salvador has built something the world has never seen before. A fortress of control, a place designed to hold men who once ruled the streets. A prison meant not just to confine, but to erase. Inside these walls, names no longer hold meaning. Power is no longer measured in fear. The past, no matter how violent, is locked away, sealed behind layers of concrete and steel. The men who once commanded armies now follow orders without question. But can you ever truly imprison a gang's influence? Can you erase decades of violence with cells and isolation? Can you break a system that has thrived in the shadows for generations? The government calls this a victory, a model for the world to follow. The streets are safer. The people walk without fear. The numbers do not lie, but numbers do not tell the whole story. There are those who call this a human rights disaster. They ask, how many among the imprisoned are truly guilty? How many were taken without proof? How many were caught in a system that does not ask questions before it locks the doors? Is this justice? Or is it only another form of power? A shift from one kind of control to another? We may never know the full truth of what happens inside these walls. We may never hear the voices of those locked away, but the world is watching. And the question remains, now we turn to you. What do you believe? Do you think this is the solution El Salvador needed, a necessary response to a crisis that threatened to consume the country? Or do you believe this is a step too far, a violation of human rights disguised as justice? Should other countries follow El Salvador's model? Should governments take the same approach? Erasing crime with mass arrests, with maximum security, with absolute control? Or is this the start of something else, a cycle that will not end, but only change its form? Let us know what you think. Comment below, share your thoughts. This conversation does not end here. If you found this story thought-provoking, subscribe for more. There are many untold stories, and sometimes the truth is locked away in places we may never see.